Picture this. Hollywood's most arrogant action star meets the world's most humble legend at a charity gala. One man desperate to prove he's still relevant, the other quietly confident, needing to prove nothing to anyone. What happens when Steven Seagal decides to publicly humiliate Chuck Norris in front of hundreds of celebrities and cameras? Tonight, we're diving into a story about respect, character, and why sometimes the most devastating response to mockery isn't anger. It's simply showing who you really are. This isn't just about two action stars. It's about every time quiet dignity face loud arrogance. So settle in, because you're about to witness what happens when a bully meets a master and learns that true strength whispers while weakness shouts. The Beverly Hills Charity Gala was supposed to be a night of giving back. Crystal chandeliers cast shadows across marble floors as Hollywood's elite mingled for children's hospitals. But celebrity egos buzzed beneath the noble cause. Chuck Norris stood quietly by auction tables, examining a donated guitar. At 73, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had made him a legend. His tuxedo was understated. No flashy jewelry, no entourage, just a man comfortable in his own skin. He'd been reluctant to attend, but when organizers explained his presence could raise an extra 100,000 for sick children, the decision became simple. Chuck had always shown up when it mattered. Across the room, Steven Seagal held court with younger actors and influencers. His voice carried over the chatter, stories of alleged CIA connections, supposed mastery of 17 martial arts, claims of teaching Navy SEALs. The stories grew more elaborate with each retelling. Seagal had spotted Chuck immediately, and something ugly twisted in his chest. Here was a man who never had to brag, never had to embellish, because he simply commanded respect. Everything Seagal desperately wanted to be, Chuck Norris simply was. The trouble started during dinner speeches. Seagal, emboldened by wine, began making comments loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "It's interesting seeing old-school guys trying to stay relevant," he said with false sympathy. "Some people can't accept when their time has passed." Chuck continued eating quietly, but guests were noticing the tension. Phones discreetly rose, recording what felt like an inevitable confrontation. "Chuck Norris jokes? Really?" Siegel's voice grew louder. "That was 15 years ago? People used to think that was funny. Now it just seems sad, doesn't it?" The silence at Chuck's table was deafening. His wife Gina's eyes flashed with protective anger, but Chuck simply smiled, conveying both peace and absolute confidence. "The man built his legacy on internet memes," Siegel pressed on, performing for the cameras. "What happens when the jokes stop being funny?" After dinner, Siegel made his move. He approached Chuck's table with swagger, trailed by his entourage and phone cameras. "Chuck Norris," he announced loudly, "the living legend. Do people still ask you to roundhouse kick things? Or has that ship sailed?" Chuck stood slowly, movements fluid and controlled. Even at 73, there was something distinctly dangerous in how he moved. Not threatening, but like a sword in its scabbard. "Hello, Steven," Chuck said simply, extending his hand. Siegel looked at the offered hand with theatrical confusion. Where's that famous Norris power? The beard that deflects bullets? Or was that just marketing? The room went quiet, conversations dying as people turned to watch. Chuck's hand remained extended, steady as stone. "I heard you've been doing Walker reruns," Siegel continued cruelly. "Going from action hero to afternoon television? Ladies and gentlemen, the mighty Chuck Norris, now available between soap opera reruns." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't playful banter. This was bullying, broadcast live on social media. Chuck lowered his hand, expression remaining serene. "You seem upset about something, Steven. Is everything all right?" The simple kindness made Siegel's cruelty appear even more grotesque. What nobody knew was the story behind Chuck's confidence. 30 years earlier, a young Steven Seagal had approached Chuck at a martial arts tournament. Back then, Seagal was nobody, just another Aikido practitioner trying to break into Hollywood. Chuck spent 20 minutes giving genuine advice, sharing contacts, encouraging his dreams. "Stay humble," Chuck had told him. "The moment you believe your own hype, you stop growing." Seagal thanked him profusely and disappeared into the crowd. Chuck thought nothing more of it. Helping others was simply what he did. But Seagal remembered, every rejection, every time someone chose a real martial artist over him, that memory festered. Chuck's kindness became a reminder of everything he felt he'd never achieved. Standing there, looking at Chuck's peaceful expression, all that resentment boiled over. "You want to know what I think?" Siegel's voice turned nasty. "You're a has-been who can't accept that nobody cares anymore. A fake tough guy who built a career on other people's jokes." He stepped closer. "So here's a challenge, old man. You and me, right here. Show everyone what Chuck Norris is really made of." The room held its breath. Cameras captured every angle as the two men faced each other, one desperate to prove his relevance, the other simply existing in his truth. Chuck looked around slowly, taking in the guests, charity organizers, children's hospital representatives who just wanted to help sick kids. Then he smiled, not mocking or threatening, but the gentle smile of a grandfather watching children play. "Stephen," he said quietly, "do you remember what I told you in Denver? 30 years ago, at the Mountain West tournament?" Siegel's face went white. "I told you to stay humble because the moment you believe your own hype, you stop growing." He paused. "I wonder what that young man who asked for my help would think of who you become." The words weren't delivered with cruelty, but genuine sadness. Disappointment in what someone could have been. Chuck turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for children fighting battles that make any movie fight scene look like a game. They show more courage in a single day than I've shown in my entire career." He gestured toward auction tables. "Instead of whatever this is, why don't we focus on why we're really here? Those kids need us." And he simply walked away, not in defeat or anger, but with the quiet dignity of a man who had nothing to prove. The transformation was immediate. Guests turned away from Seagal as if he'd become invisible, gravitating toward auction tables. Within minutes, bidding resumed with renewed enthusiasm. Seagal stood alone in awkward silence, his entourage melting away. The phones that had been recording his triumph now captured his humiliation. But the real devastation wasn't the social media posts. It was the mirror Chuck had held up to his soul. By the bar, Chuck watched auction totals climb higher than expected. Celebrities who'd been on phones all evening were now genuinely engaged. "That was beautifully done," came a voice beside him. Morgan Freeman had watched the entire exchange. "He's hurting," Chuck replied simply. Hurt people hurt people. Most would have destroyed him." Chuck shrugged. "What would that accomplish? The kids still need help, and somewhere inside that angry man is still the young martial artist who just wanted to make movies." Seagal had found his exit, leaving behind a night that would be remembered long after the last photograph. The viral videos would showcase something the internet desperately needed: genuine class facing cruelty. The charity gala raised $2.3 million that night, nearly double their goal. But the real victory was quieter, more profound. Chuck Norris demonstrated something revolutionary: the power of not fighting back, not from weakness, but from such complete strength that proving it became unnecessary. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. True confidence doesn't require applause. And genuine toughness sometimes looks like walking away from a fight you could easily win. Steven Seagal spent that evening trying to diminish a legend, only to discover that some things can't be torn down. They can only be admired or ignored. Chuck reminded everyone watching that responding to cruelty with kindness isn't surrendering. It's playing a completely different game. The young martial artist who once asked Chuck for advice is probably still in there somewhere, underneath years of insecurity and desperate posturing. Maybe one day he'll remember what Chuck told him about humility. But here's the beautiful truth that emerged from that ugly moment. When someone tries to make you small, you have a choice. You can shrink to their level, or you can remain exactly who you are, and let that be your answer. After all, legends aren't made by the fights they win. They're made by the fights they choose not to have.